All right, well, it is 4 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. Let me start the recording. And Kathy, take it away.
Okay, I'll call the Plan Commission for Oshkosh for Tuesday, February 16, 2021 to order. As Mark said, please keep excess noise muted so that we don't hear it, including cell phones. I think he has explained how we do this. The Plan Commission will hear from staff first. They will ask technical questions, and then we will open it up to the audience for comment. And when public comment is finished, we bring it back to the commission and take a vote. So we'll call the roll.
Mr. Coulibaly? Ms. Davy?
Present.
Mr. Ford? Mr. Grove? Mr. Kiefer? Mr. Kiefer? I saw your mic go unmuted, but didn't hear anything.
I'm here.
Go ahead. Yep, thank you. Mr. Mitchell?
Here.
Mr. Perry?
Present.
Mr. Perry?
Present.
Mr. Stengel?
Here.
Mr. Marshall?
Here.
Mr. Hintz?
Present.
Chairwoman Prop?
Here.
8 present.
Okay, Plan Commission, you have the February 2nd meeting minutes. What's your pleasure?
This is Ford. I move approval.
Kin second. I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Minutes are approved. We'll begin with item.
Can I just ask who made the motion? I just want to make sure I get it right for next month's minutes.
That was Michael Ford. I'm here as well, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, council member.
Okay. Item 1 is residential design standards variance to allow window area reductions on the front facade at 1803 Oshkosh Avenue. Were there any site inspections? I had one. Anybody else? Site inspections? Okay, staff, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this item is a residential design standards variance to allow window area reductions. The subject site is outlined in blue there. You can see it amongst a number of other residential properties. And then just to the north is actually the corporate business park district, where a number of mixed commercial properties are going in. Oshkosh Avenue abuts the property on its northern side. Just an aerial showing the subject site there. So this applicant actually did this work prior to obtaining approval and prior to obtaining a permit. Late 2020, planning services staff became aware that a window area reduction had been completed on the front facade without permits and without approval. Applicable ordinance prohibits window area reductions on front facades. The applicant stated that he did this work because what he did was he converted an enclosed porch to a bedroom, and he was also having a pest issue with pests getting into the walls and such, as a side note. So those were the 2 reasons that he gave for doing this work. It's a little hard to see on the screen. These images were included in your staff reports, showing on the left the previous porch, and then on the right, I think, was the bedroom that it was converted to. You can just see a current image on the left there with the reduced window on the left side of the facade. And then on the right, the bigger image just shows what it was before. So you can see how those 4 windows there, where that enclosed porch was, When that was converted to a bedroom, that was reduced to one window there. Just wanted to note that the facade was under the 25% window and door area that would be required by code, even before this work was done. And that was a concern that staff had and we looked at. But we do understand the hardship with putting a bedroom in there and needing to work with what the bedroom was going to be. Just showing some street view images there. So staff considered this request. We do not condone, obviously, work being done without a permit and without required approvals. But again, we understand the hardship and we understand the applicant converting that area to a bedroom. We did recommend some conditions, one being that plans be submitted for a planter box underneath that reduced window, and also landscaping points along the section or segment of facade where the window was reduced. We thought that the landscaping and the planter box would help kind of break up some of that facade monotony that would result with increased siding area. So with that, staff recommends approval with the finding and conditions listed in your staff report.
Okay, and the chair neglected to say that the chair accepts the staff report as part of the record beforehand. Okay, technical questions, commission? John Hintz, he might not have been first, but I see him.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. I just wanted to ask staff, I think we're gonna run into this kind of an issue a lot in the future because a lot of houses have these porches and people developing those porches because you have those side-by-side windows that closely, and maybe we might need to look into something as far as an add-on to this ordinance for these porches that have no space in between windows. Do we have anything that's like that, or has anybody thought about doing anything like that? Because I think that's going to help us down the road. Because I think you're going to see a lot of people turning porches into rooms. Just because I know the house I grew up in, basically it was like a second bedroom for me in the summertime, but in the wintertime, obviously it was too cold. But we could have changed that really easily.
If you recall, probably 5-6 months ago at this point now, we had a workshop about some proposed changes we're working on for design standards, period, to get rid of that just single requirement of saying it's 25% windows and that's the only option. We're working on that point-based design standard system, which is going to help in situations like this where we're trying to encourage good design, but giving a property owner some options on how they achieve that curb appeal that we're looking for.
Okay, Michael Ford.
Yes, question for staff. What will be the next steps if those conditions for the landscaping and the planter box are not met?
So they would be at that point, if permits are issued, they would be in violation of their approval, and we would be sending out citations like we would for any violation.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other technical questions? I'm not seeing any. Then we'll open it up to public comment, and if the applicant is present, we'd like a public statement from them.
I do not see the applicant with us today.
Okay. Then is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak on this item, window reduction? Anyone else wishing to speak on the window reduction? Seeing none. You see any, Mark?
I do not.
Okay.
Oh,
Then,
nope, go ahead.
well, then I'm ready to ask for, I'm ready to close public comment if there's nobody else. So I will do that. I'll close the public comment period. And Commission, we need a motion.
Motion to adopt the findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report.
Give your name.
Hins make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second. Mitchell, second.
Mitchell seconds. Okay, good. Discussion on the motion.
It looks like Mr. Perry has a comment.
Okay, Tom? Tom Perry, you're on.
Okay, let's try this because the space bar is not working. I don't have a raise hand function, so I'll try and comment through other notice. But once again, here we have a situation where work is done before permits and things like that. Regardless of whether or not people are going to be converting their porches or whatever, if this applicant would have come to us through the right channels, this would have likely been approved in a variance request because it outstanding of the siding, it's not as bad as some of the things we've seen in the past. So, I mean, I will reluctantly vote yes, but we really have to get that word out that we just can't continue to do this after the fact.
Any more comments from the Plan Commission? Seeing none, we'll call the roll.
Mr. Kiefer,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Perry,
Aye.
Mr. Perry,
Aye.
Mr. Stengel,
Aye.
Mr. Marshall,
Aye.
Miss Davy,
Aye.
Mr. Hintz,
Aye.
Chairwoman Prof.
Aye.
Motion carries 9-0.
Okay, we'll go on to item 2, public
Oh.
hearing on a.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ford, I missed you.
Oh,
No worries, I was late. Aye.
Okay, we'll go on to item 2, public hearing, conditional use permit request for a temporary use permitted extension at 2728 Oregon Street. Were there any site inspections? I don't see any, but Mark, can you see?
Mr. Hintz,
Okay. Well, then Chair will accept the staff report as part of the record. Staff, go ahead to explain.
Thank you. So the subject site has frontage on Oregon Street and West 28th Avenue. It has an industrial land use and is zoned heavy industrial. Here's an aerial view of the subject site. So in 2020, they received a temporary use permit for storage of equipment and materials for street reconstruction. That temporary use permit has expired. On the aerial photo shown here, you can see a 2020 aerial photo, so this is last year, showing the storage area for the equipment and materials. They would like to extend that temporary use permit, which is only good for 90 days and it expired last December. They're now looking to extend that temporary use permit, which requires a conditional use permit, and they'd like to extend that through July of this year as they have not completed the street reconstruction, so they need that additional time to store the equipment and materials. Here's a little closer view of the material storage area, again, fronting West 28th Avenue. Here's the site plan on the left showing the storage area. On the right, top right, is the current condition of the storage area, and in the bottom right is the previous condition prior to the temporary use permit. Staff is recommending approval of the conditional use permit with 2 conditions. One is that the TUP shall expire on July 31st of this year, and also after the TUP expires, the site shall be fully restored to the pre-use conditions. That includes full replacement of any damaged lawn areas. So with that, staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit with the stated conditions.
Okay, are there any technical questions? I'm not seeing any.
Yep, I don't see any.
You don't see any?
Nope.
Well, then this is a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing. And the applicant is in fact the city, is it not?
No,
Actually-
the applicant is it PTS?
PTS Construction, the
Construction.
contractor doing the street reconstruction work.
All right, is the applicant present to talk about it?
I do not see anyone from the applicant.
From the applicant? Okay. Anyone else wanting to speak on this item from the public? Anyone else wanting to speak from the public? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And there is no applicant, so we'll have no closing statements. Commission, we need a motion.
Ford, I'll make a motion to adopt the findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report.
Ken, second.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion, commission? Seeing none, we'll call the roll.
Mr. Kiefer,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Perry,
Aye.
Mr. Stengel,
Aye.
Mr. Marshall,
Aye.
Miss Davy,
Aye.
Councilmember Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Hintz,
Aye.
Chairwoman Prop.
Aye.
Motion carries 9-0.
Okay, we'll go on to item 3, public hearing on text amendments to the zoning ordinance. I don't think site inspections are applicable, and the chair will accept the staff report as part of the record. Staff, go ahead and explain.
So Brian's gonna give a little detail on the actual ordinance, and then if Plan Commission would like, I can give some of the background and history on how we got to this point. So I'll have Brian go first.
All right, so staff is recommending code revisions to include a new residential land use, which will be transitional residential housing. And that is meant to accommodate housing and support services for temporary placement of persons on parole, extended supervision, or probation, and is meant to accommodate that short-term residential for typically less than 24 months, and allow for up to 8 persons living there. The zoning districts that we have shown to be changed for this would be to allow the TRH or transitional residential housing in all 3 multifamily residential districts as conditional use in institutional district, conditional use in neighborhood mixed use district, and conditional use in central mixed use district.
So a little background on how we got to this point. There was a use that went in on Jefferson Street a number of years ago as a permitted use under the prior code. There has been some concerns from the neighbors about that property that have brought up to council a number of times. A few months back, we had a large workshop with council, the neighbors, operator of that facility to discuss the issues related to it. After that large workshop with council and discussion with council, staff was directed to begin drafting an ordinance after some research that could address these for future places in the city. From that information, the planning staff worked closely with the attorney's office to look at our ordinance, see where it may fit and how to fit it in. So looking at similar types of land uses, what districts may be appropriate. We were looking at things that are a similar land use, potentially like a boarding house, and what districts that is allowed in, the number of people that could live in a boarding house type facility, and how it could compare to this. We started to look at similar zoning districts. From that point, we worked with the attorney's office on drafting the definition and how it would work within our ordinance. We had submitted this information then back to council and indicated to them that we were planning to bring it through the process. The start of that process is obviously here today with Plan Commission, where we outline what the proposed change is. And then after today, this will go back to council for their kind of review and hopeful adoption. I did forward the council an email that I received earlier today with some, I guess, questions and comments related to the proposed ordinance amendment.
Okay, any other staff comments before we?
Nope, that's it. We're happy to answer
Okay.
questions about it.
Okay, technical questions to staff. I'm not seeing any. I have one, but I don't see anybody else.
Looks like Councilmember Ford.
Okay. Mike, go ahead.
Thank you. So in that email you forwarded, Mark, there was a question posed there about the number of individuals who may live in transitional residential housing under this being 8, and there was some concern that that was inconsistent with other ordinances limiting non-related family members, non-related individuals living together to 6. Just wondered if you could speak to that.
So I can speak to how we got to the 8, and obviously staff with input of this body and council would be open to changes. Staff originally started with 6, mirroring what we have in our boarding house ordinance. But as this evolved and we were reviewing it in discussions with our inspections division, the inspections division cited 8 as a typical cutoff between the residential and the commercial land use and how the building code requirements impact this. Ultimately, that is where we landed on the 8, kind of comparing that with similar land uses for like the rooming house, boarding house. We were in that 6 to 8 range. And usually, you need empirical evidence of why you would differentiate between those two. So we used citing of the building code is kind of where our cutoff was.
Thank you, Mark. Quick follow-up. So would that mean that if we were to lower it to 6, that could theoretically not be defensible or put the ordinance in legal jeopardy?
I would look to Attorney
Jump in. This is Lynn, the city attorney. Yeah, the reason we looked at mirroring it up with the rooming house and with the requirements in the building code is because that's the most defensible. If we're going to change from that, we'd be looking for what's the explanation for that other than perceptions of who may be living there. And so we, as a staff, couldn't justify that, or didn't have that empirical data. So we looked at the building code and the rooming house and said, this is the most like this is the most defensible.
One last follow-up, if that's okay. So presumably that's the same explanation for how the individual zoning areas like multifamily residential, how those were chosen to be included?
Correct. The zoning districts, when you look at like the multifamily districts, we use that same kind of rationale of looking at common uses, applicable codes.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. I see Mr. Mitchell also has questions.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was muted. Justin Mitchell, please.
Great, thank you. Reentry for individuals with criminal or criminal justice records or interactions can be a significant challenge and a barrier for, I guess, any sort of community housing success. I'm curious if there is anything present beyond just the city looking at this or amending their language on kind of an isolated basis. Is there any sort of reentry plan for Oshkosh and Winnebago County, or is there a committee that's working on this that, would be able to provide a high degree of quality feedback from knowledgeable individuals that are working on something in which this fits into a vision, a plan, that sort of thing?
I can't speak to that larger issue. We were directed to look at the zoning code and the land use aspect of it, of how it could fit into our code.
Okay, I have 2 other questions. I mean, I follow up on that. I feel like, I'm assuming, Mark, you like me are a big fan of plans and kind of nerdy with looking into plans and it feels, it seems like something that should be present, that if we're going to make decisions regarding the housing of individuals that have criminal records or have had that interaction, it's a serious problem across the nation. That maybe we could look at that in some fashion, bring in some partners. So another question then, I didn't get this over to you soon enough, so I do apologize, but I would be curious to take a look at a map of these locations. And in your mind, would you say that the possibilities that this change creates, does that provide pretty equal distribution across all portions of the town, or does it kind of isolate options in just a few small pockets that you would traditionally assume would maybe house lower income individuals?
Yeah, so I'm gonna attempt, I got your email late, so I'm gonna attempt to screen share something. I may have to stop sharing on one and share on another. And can you see the map I have up, commission members?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna show 3 maps. When we did it, we had to obviously break it out in a little bit of geographical areas, just because it's hard to show you everything on one map. I will draw your attention to the right side. This date on the right side is not going to change between the images I show you, because it was the total for the entire city in terms of lots and existing dwelling units. There's also vacant land in these maps that are accommodated within these zoning districts that we've proposed. So about little 1,865 total lots, about 8,136 existing dwelling units within the zoning districts that we're recommending for the conditional use permit. So here's the south side of the city. This is kind of the central, kind of middle slice of the city. And hopefully you can see the last one is the kind of the northern slice of the city.
So Mark, the brown hatched areas are the ones that are.
Yep. Anything that, on this one, it's mainly brown that you can see towards the bottom. You can see some of the orange and the blue. This one maybe shows the best the difference in colors. This one you kind of see the orangish colors is the multifamily zoning districts. Blue is the institutional zoning properties, and the we'll call it magenta is the CMU zoned properties.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. Just my last question. The name that was selected for this, in a way, transitional housing, I think a lot of times this type of housing is referred to as, reentry housing or something regarding reentry. And it's not that I don't think transition is a proper description. My concern is that words matter, and what people associate with certain things matters a lot. And we do have a need for transitional housing related to homeless individuals in the community. There's several efforts that are currently underway to develop those programs. Those serve a slightly different population, though they do overlap. My concern is that there's an issue at one of these homes that adheres to this ordinance, and a group in the community associates that behavior at a transitional home for reentry with any sort of project that somebody's looking at to provide transitional homeless services to folks, and that they don't quite understand the distinction, and you end up having a considerable hurdle in the community just because things weren't named clear enough from the get-go. I looked in transitional residential housing, it seems to not be the norm for a name, and I'm just curious why that was selected and if it has to stay that way.
Yeah, so we looked at various other existing zoning ordinances, including HUD's definitions, and that is where we took a lot of the information from was the HUD definition of how they define this. So we did some research for what other ordinances, for example, Green Bay, Milwaukee, Madison had, as well as looking at some of the HUD definitions and how they name stuff.
And so the more, I guess, common, transitional housing, which refers to just a step between homelessness and some form of more permanent rental housing or ownership. That is not typically limited to just individuals who are participating in some sort of corrections transition. Are the transitional homeless programming, are those squared away in our ordinances, meaning we're not going to have a transitional residential housing section and then a transitional housing section that excludes the word residential?
Correct. So we have two other land uses right now that meet some of those needs, depending upon services provided, the type of facility. In our institutional and our institutional residential land uses cover the vast majority. I would say 99% of those. This one was asked to look at a specific segment of it. So yeah, we have some land uses that already covered those, Justin.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I think Tom Perry was next.
Thank you. My question is, what do we zone 8-bed, 4 to 8-bed CBRFs under?
You grab your zoning ordinance. Well, I'll look it up quick because it's different on 4 to 8-bed, 8 to 16, more than 16. So give me a second and we'll. Actually, I think it's on the image I have here. I take that back. 1 to 8-bed CBRFs or community living arrangements. On the bottom left, you can see are permitted in a number of districts. In the 9 to 13 are conditional use permits, and you kind of see on the bottom of the image there.
What I'm looking for is, are they zoned or considered as like a rooming house, the same as a rooming house for a 4 to 8-bed CBRF?
The difference we have in our ordinance when it comes to the CBRFs are if they are state regulated and licensed, we use these community living arrangement land use. If they are not a licensed facility, then we would look at the rooming house, boarding house land uses.
Okay, so where I'm going with this is I firmly believe that the transitional residential housing, as we're exploring here tonight, is misclassified under rooming, where it should probably be more under the CBRF statute, simply because when you have a rooming house, you have no services whatsoever. And in transitional residential housing, while services are somewhat limited, there still are services in those homes. POs come by, counselors can come by. There are services in those homes. And so I just look at this as being an issue of this being incorrectly classified and perhaps should be under more of the 4 to 8-bed CBRF codes within the city here.
I guess when staff looked at it, the 4 to 8 CBRF units are permitted uses in all single family residential zoning districts. Based on the feedback we've heard, they were looking at this as more of the more intense boarding house, rooming house type land use, which is why we chose to go with more similar districts for that land use.
Okay, Tom? Well, I have a question. A statement and a question. The email that we received talk about specific locations, and we are not voting on locations today. We need to point that out. We're voting on the text amendment to the ordinance. And so this was informational, the locations that Mark showed, and I didn't see that in our staff report anyway. Maybe it was there, but I didn't see it. How many people now are in a dwelling such as this? Because we have some dwellings that don't come under this kind of ordinance, don't we?
So obviously we have already existing land uses that would be deemed legal non-conforming if this ordinance went into place. For example, the facility that kind of led to this discussion, I believe, is 8 individuals. It's a duplex, and I believe there are 4 individuals in each side. So it's 8, similar to what was proposed here. There may be other facilities in the city that, again, this ordinance would not directly affect because they would come in under the grandfathering clause or legal non-conforming. Yeah, in that email you mentioned, through zoning, we can't regulate out an individual property of a common zoning. We have to handle it by zoning district, and then we use that conditional use permit to evaluate specific sites.
Okay, so are there other such dwellings that might have 6 people or 4 people? Do we know?
Are you asking, I guess, 4 to 6 people, or 4 to 6 people who would fall under this, placements of persons on parole?
No, the placement of persons on parole, the type of individual that we're talking about putting in these dwellings. The Jefferson Street location that created issues for folks, you said has 8 residents. Are there other locations that have 6 residents or 4 residents?
Off the top of my head, I do not know of another specific example. I would have to do a little more research to see what the Department of Justice has elsewhere in Oshkosh.
Okay, is there any, but we need to, in the ordinance, the attorney and you believe that we need to have that number at 8, up to 8 persons. With more than 8 persons.
So the way we
Is that right?
is that more than 8 persons would get bumped up into our institutional residential zoning district. It's not that they're not permitted. They're just going to be categorized separately because then you're getting into a more intense land use than those under 8.
Oh, okay, so this applies for up to 8 residents.
Yep, so we're actually amending both at the same time here in our proposal. We're adding the land use at kind of the 1 to 8 number, and then also amending our institutional residential that would include the more than 8 individuals. That's you see kind of in the end part of the definition. We're recommending that more than 8 we would constitute institutional residential.
Oh, okay. Any other questions, Commission, or comments? Well, I'm not seeing any. We've been under technical questions, haven't we?
Correct.
So this is a public hearing. We will open the public hearing and ask for for statements from anyone in the public that wishes to speak. Anyone from the public present that wishes to speak on this text amendment to the zoning ordinance? Do you see anyone, Mark?
I do not see anyone with their hand raised.
Okay. Well, then we will close the public hearing. And the applicant is the Department of Community Development. So do you have any closing statements, Department?
No, like I said, we tried to take some of the direction that we were given, evaluate what was out there for other ordinances, work with the city to come up with what we felt was a reasonable ordinance amendment based on the information we had available.
Okay, any more discussion, Commission? Then we need a motion. We need a motion.
This is Ford. I'll make a motion to adopt the findings and recommendations as stated in the staff report.
Defer, I'll second.
Okay, and I took that out of order. Now we have our official discussion on the motion, if anybody wants to say anything.
Looks like Mr. Mitchell.
Okay, go ahead, Justin.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Mark, is anybody in any sort of city planning role looking at reentry housing, the challenges that our community maybe has? You know, what best practices, that sort of thing? Is that going to be part of the housing survey that you're doing?
Correct. That's one of the elements of the housing study.
Great. Thank you.
Mike Ford.
Thank you. I just want to thank city staff and City Attorney Lawrenson for their work on this. It was stated in the background, but we had a workshop on this at City Council, and it was us who directed and asked them to come back with something like that. So to Mr. Mitchell's point, I mean, I do get that, and I think it makes sense, right, that we need to have a larger reentry plan. But any failure to do that, I don't think that should be directed at city staff. You can direct that towards council, myself included. And to that end, we did articulate a goal, official city goal for the city manager to address issues of individuals experiencing homelessness in our community. So at the very least, we've set a marker on that aspect of it. I know that's only part of it, but point is definitely well taken, and happy to take the blame on that. And certainly, I'll bring this up at council when this specifically comes up to us for a vote.
Okay, Tom Perry.
While I do firmly believe that this is being considered under the wrong category, comparing it to rooming houses, I am comforted in knowing that it still would require a conditional use permit, and so therefore, you know, noticing the neighborhood or the neighbors still applies, and so I can support it as now, but I would really love for it to be looked at in terms of services provided in a residential facility. If so, even a smaller amount, then it needs to be categorized as something other than rooming. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? I don't see any. We'll take a vote.
Mr. Kiefer?
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell?
Aye.
Mr. Perry?
Aye.
Mr. Stengel?
Aye.
Mr. Marshall?
Aye.
Ms. Davy?
Aye.
Mr. Councilmember Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Hintz?
Aye.
Chairwoman Prop?
Aye.
Motion carries 9-0.
Okay, is there any other business?
The
For the
only
commission?
the only item I will add is that it does look like we are going to be virtual through at least the end of April.
Oh, okay.
And it looks like Mr. Hintz maybe has a question.
Go ahead, John.
Actually, it's just a comment. I don't know if we have anybody watching, but it is election day. Just to remind people that it's primary, get out there and vote. There are races for the council, the mayor, and state director of public instruction out there. So there's reason to go out and vote today. And it's nice to be here on an election day with you guys instead of working at the polls for once.
Okay, then I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved, hands.
Second, Marshall.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right, we're going into a workshop now.